Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Jason here. Today we're going to go deep into the topic of Ferrari classic interiors. All right. If you're looking to buy one of these cars, there is a list of things you need to look out for to get the right car. Okay, I'm going to give you my advice on what that list actually has. If you've never seen one of these cars on the inside, all right, a Testarossa or a 328, I'm going to show you what it looks like. What does a 91 and an 86 look like respectively, to give you an idea of the level. There is a particular way to get in and out of these cars to keep the wear to a minimum. It's a bit of a gymnastics routine, but I'm going to show you what that looks like. You should be adopting this as your own routine as well to keep that wear down. And lastly, how do you maintain these seats, this dash, to keep it looking as good as possible? Well, I'm going to show you the process and the products I use to do that. All right, so that's what you're in for. Stick around, buckle up, let's get to it. In terms of the spec of the 328, obviously very traditional. Black, I mean more traditional is probably tan on these cars. That's the one everybody typically thinks of, tan or crema as well. And this is a good example. The seats, obviously the driver's seat is one you can see that could use a little bit of love, and it will eventually get that. But this is a very classic one. Nice contrast to the Rosa Corsa color. And you can see here that in general it's been well taken care of. Now, I've had the car for 10 years and haven't had to do too much to it. Passenger door panel, get an idea as well, the leather that you see on this. And it wraps all the way around the door handle. Door handle, incidentally, is in the back side right here. And you have to work around the switches. Incidentally, the switches on the 328 are quite finicky, quite often need replacing, and not the easiest ones to source or the cheapest ones to source. I'll explain that one on another video actually. The GTS plaque on the driver's side, just below the dash. And even the center console of the car is actually leather as well, and it's a fun one to try to treat, but needs to be done. And that's what we're going to look at very shortly here on this video. Give you an idea of how to keep this leather looking good. Now, in terms of the spec of my car, I'm actually very lucky that I got a Rosa Corsa Testarossa with crema leather. Quite often they're spec with black, which is pretty obviously safe in terms of showing no wear, but the contrast between crema and the black, the narrow leather on this here on the dash is a really great contrast. And also with the custom floor mats that I had made from Ferrari. But this is probably the real benefit of this car, is to have this spec. And even the back sill where the luggage, where the Shadoni luggage would go, is also specced with crema, and even the ceiling of the car too. And you can see even back here where you've got your instrument, sorry, for your instruction, your service guides would go in there. It's pretty tight. It doesn't really fit in well, but the actual service manuals are back there. And even the handbrake of the car is crema leather. The two switches to open the front and the rear bonnet. And that is the inside. And going to the armrest of the car, also in the same spec with crema and black. And the condition of this is obviously very good. So again, I'm really happy to have that particular spec of car. Another one that looks really good on a Testarossa is to have black with red carpets. Also not very often, or you can't find too many. One of the cars I looked at actually had that spec, but the rest of the car unfortunately wasn't really worth it. But that's an example of what a 91 Testarossa with crema would look like. And incidentally too, this spec is the same color. Black with crema is what the car that Sonny Crockett drove in Miami Vice, which is another reason why I really wanted to have this particular one, because it's just, yeah, the poster car that I grew up with. So there you go, crema with black narrow on a 91 Testarossa. Ultimately, if you want to keep your seats looking good, the first thing you should do is purchase some protection like you can get here from Ferrari to keep your seats covered. And I keep that on all the time when I'm not using them. And I have them particularly for the Testarossa because the crema color is obviously pretty sensitive, but I need to get a set for the 328 as well, but definitely worth buying. Okay, so part of the maintenance of these cars are keeping the seats in good condition, is actually figuring out the right way to get in and out of them, because the abuse time after time, stepping in, stepping out, putting your weight in the seats is actually what's going to wear them out. And that's one thing I figured out, is that there's a certain way to do it so that you prevent that wear. And the main thing obviously you want to do is, for example, when I'm sitting here on the sill of the Testarossa, all right, that part's meant for it. But a lot of people would actually sit with their bum here and pressing onto the bolster. And that's the first area you're going to wear it out. So really try to avoid, if you're sitting at an event or whatever, talking to somebody, try to sit in this part of the car, all right, and not in this particular area. And the next thing obviously is when you get in, you really want to try to make sure that you put your weight really down in the middle of the seat and not essentially in the bolster and then fall into the deepest part of it. The same thing, obviously, when you brush past this with your jeans, with your belt, for example, any little buttons that you have on your pants, where your pocket is, or in your jacket, it's going to wear and it's going to essentially damage those parts of the car. So the main thing is obviously is when you get in, and because the car is quite low, it is a bit of a gymnast routine to do it, but you want to make sure that you're putting your hand on the sill itself. Okay, I'll put my hand on the steering wheel, put my foot inside, and then essentially I can drop in and not put any weight onto the bolster itself. Okay, that's the real trick. Getting out, same thing, hand on the steering wheel, hand on the actual door sill, and then I'm using my foot to brace myself, and I never put myself on the bolster. Obviously I don't weigh a whole lot, or I'm pretty small, but that's what the way I found that actually prevents the seats from getting wore out. And I definitely make sure when anybody else is trying to get into the car, passenger with me, I coach them as well so they don't essentially mess up the seats. But try that out. Let me know in the comments if you think this helps you. When you're looking to buy a Testarossa or any Ferrari for that matter, the interior condition is one of the things you really need to look at before you bite the bullet. And it's obviously going to be tricky when you're looking at cars that are on the internet, but the seats are an important area to look at to see how well the previous owner has taken care of the car. And the first spot is going to be the bolsters in particular, all right? So this area here is going to take the biggest abuse on any car, these particular spots here. So the sides, back bolster, and of course your hip bolster here. And the driver's seat is the one where obviously the most of the action's happening. And you're going to see, obviously, how well the car has been treated over time on this here. And it's very hard to see in pictures from the internet how well the person has actually cared for the car. And even in this light here, you don't necessarily see it so well, but you really want to look at this very carefully. And on a car with cream interior like the Testarossa here, you're going to actually see really, really quickly how well this car has been taken care of. And here you can see, obviously, this starts to show some stretching and wrinkling here over time. Mind you, the car is 1991, and of course, ideally these cars are going to look perfect, but who is going to show or who is not going to show age after so much time? So this is the first spot you want to look. Okay, the next spot you're going to have to inspect is obviously going to be the stitching. And on this particular generation of car, the Testarossa, and I'll show you on the 328 as well, there is no piping. There's obviously only stitching. And this is a sign of one that's actually been fairly well taken care of. And I'll show you how to maintain this as well, but you can see that the stitching is still intact. And that's obviously what you want to be looking for. But again, it's not easy to see these things online. And I remember when I was looking at cars, I would have people say that they have a museum quality car. And then when I actually got to see it, it was far from the case. So you really want to make sure you're looking at these things. Obviously, as you get in, they can fray from contact with your jeans or your pants. And this is an area you really want to watch out for. Now here's the passenger side bolster for the hip on the Testarossa, and you can see how much better the leather is on this, and the stitching looks great. The gap here between the stitching is really good. It's consistent. And going up the back bolster, you can see that obviously there has been not as much use of the passenger side, and it's the same for my car too. Going forward, that there's not too many people sitting in this car. But these are the things you really want to look at very closely when you talk about seats. Moving to the 328, obviously a little bit older car. This is 1986, and again you're looking at the same high wear areas, the bolster and the stitching area. and you can get an idea of how this year of car is actually holding up as well. Again, the stitching for me is really important, that it's not showing any signs of wear here. But along the actual back bolster, you can see that the car could use some work, some leather repair, and I will actually be doing that on the car. I'll give you another angle here as well. High wear area of the 328, the back bolster. And the seat hip bolster. Now in contrast, if you take a look at the passenger side bolster, you can see obviously this doesn't get those same wear that the driver's side does, and nor does the back. And so if you're going to be having problems, if you're going to be looking for issues, it's going to be on the driver's side seat. So you really want to make sure when you're inspecting a car, get really good pictures of this from the previous owner or from the dealer. And that's not to say that you're necessarily going to be able to get much of a discount on the car, but you really need to know what you're up against when you're going to be buying one of these. Now here's how the 328 looks, the dash of the car. This car has been always taken really good care of. Hasn't sat in the direct sun not for very long, definitely not in my company. And you can see there's no blemishes, there's no stretching on it, no bubbles. Even the stitching line on it looks really good. And obviously when you get to the gauges in this area here, it doesn't really take a big beating, but nothing looks unusual. Even the steering wheel on these cars, and that's the one thing I even saw in the Maranello. Maranello actually had bubbles on the front face of it, actually where the airbag comes out. Obviously no airbag here in this Momo steering wheel, but these are the areas that will take abuse, but they needed to be treated as well, and we're going to go into that shortly. But here you can see an example of what it should look like if you're going to buy one of these cars. Okay, the last thing about the leather you want to be concerned with is the smell of it. All right, does it actually smell like leather? Does it smell healthy? Or is it musky and moldy smelling? Obviously a car that's been stowed for a long time, hasn't been used, the windows have been closed, isn't going to smell great. But you want to really understand if the leather actually smells healthy. And there are sprays that you can get from different manufacturers. Even Ferrari has one, a leather scent spray, to try to help to get that back. But you're going to need to protect the leather. In that process, you'll start to get the leather back to smelling natural. But this is something you should be looking for as well. Okay, so what tools are you going to need to do to clean your own leather interior? Well, first off, I highly recommend getting this products here to actually apply to the seats. One of them is a saddle soap, all right, and the second one is a leather balsam. Now I'll put those into the comments where you can purchase these materials from Amazon, if I recall, but they work really, really well. Next you're going to need is microfiber towels. During the cleaning process, you're going to need it to apply in a foam version like this here for the balsam, and I also have a version to polish the seats afterwards or to wipe up any excess. This is a finer version. You're going to need two bowls of warm water, and you're going to have to keep that clean all the time. You're going to need foam applicators for the actual soaping process. And I highly recommend you buy a seat cover from Ferrari to keep the seats protected when you're not using the car. That's the basics you're going to need. Let's get to it.